Chris Buckler in Washington. Let's speak now to retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who's a senior fellow at the Defense Priorities and joins us now from Washington. Thanks a lot for joining us, Colonel Davis. From what we understand, according to Jim Mattis, Defense Secretary, I think he said 3 sites were targeted. Is that enough to destroy Syria's chemical weapons facilities?
No, absolutely not. I think that the intent was, well, we can't just hit one site like we did last April, because, they had the Air Force airfield back up in operation within 24 hours. So I think especially because President Trump had said several times that, we're going to have a much bigger response. So this time they expanded it to 3 different sites. But there's no way that you can knock, any kind of, whether there is a chemical weapons program still active or not, whatever you want to do, 3 targets on such a short amount of targets will not destroy any kind of capability. It will send a message that, we're going to continue to attack. But I bet what you're going to see is that Syria will probably do everything in their power to get whatever was hit reinstituted and rebuilt and back on the ground, whatever it was doing, to kind of show their defiance, I suspect. But so the big question in all this is, now what? So we've struck this. Do we think that that's going to make, Bashar al-Assad do something different? Is it going to make Russia back down? I think in the days ahead, we're going to see that this has probably not been real effective towards what we want to accomplish. And, that remains to be seen just exactly what Russia does do in response. As let's see, Anatoly Anatov tonight said in a release that they felt that they are being threatened and that we warn such actions will not be left without consequences, and all responsibility rests with Washington, London, and Paris. Now, what does he mean? Who knows? And maybe they don't even know yet, but that's something we're certainly going to watch for. So,
Colonel Davis, so what was the point of the airstrike? I mean, is it just bluster on the part of the West?
Well, that's a really good question that I've been asking ever since, these threats were made. What is the intent? What is the purpose? What's the strategy behind this? Because unless you have a sustained like Desert Storm type massive aerial bombardment where you literally take out all the military capability, you're not going to be able to really impact what Syria is able to do.
The question that I wanted to ask, Colonel Davis, was, so we have this attack and this strike, but in the end, the person who is still the leader of Syria and who's still committing these alleged atrocities is Bashar al-Assad, and he's still in office. So it's almost as if there's no point.
Well, I can't say that I disagree too strongly with you there, because, again, you say you want a message to be sent, but he's still in charge. And so what the Secretary Mattis just said there about what the intent was, well, certainly Russia doesn't agree that that's the case, because they don't even admit that there was a chemical attack by Bashar al-Assad. So they're saying whatever your intent was, that's not us. I mean, we didn't do that, so we're not going to, get the message and do something different. He's still in charge. He still has his people there. They're still fighting a civil war, and they still have battles against rebels. So that's going to continue on. And again, that's why I keep asking the question, what now, and what was the intent of this? And I'm not sure that anything really useful has been accomplished.
Well, there was a curious phrase that he used. He talked about U.S. vital interests in destroying Syrian assets. And I think he even quoted something from kind of U.S. constitutional law about Article 9 or something like that. Explain that, because it almost seems as if he's having his cake and eating it.
The War Powers Act explicitly says the only time that the president can order unilateral action is if the United States is directly threatened, and by any stretch, that was not the case. That's why this is so important that the United States Congress is the only one with authority to authorize these kinds of actions here that don't represent an immediate threat to the country. So that's something that we're going to have to grapple with, because Congress is, frankly, again, not really stepping up to their constitutional responsibilities.
I suspect that in the coming days, the legal basis for this airstrike is going to be something that's up for debate, because if you remember the last time around, when President Obama had his so-called red lines, which was crossed, and then he didn't act, he was worried about not having any legal backing from Congress to act.
Right, and that's why it's so important. You can't make threats that you can't back up, or that you can't back up, legally. if the legal justification doesn't exist, then you have to be really careful about what you're going to threaten, because now if you make good on it, you might actually violate our own Constitution, and that's just there's nothing good about that. And so I think that's something that is going to be looked at very carefully in the coming days, is what was the justification, even domestically, forget about internationally, because as your correspondent said there at the beginning of this segment, the OPCW is only just now arriving, and we still don't have conclusive evidence. And I think it is so critical for our credibility and our, if we want to stop chemical attacks and punish whoever was responsible, that we first need to make absolutely certain we know who did do it, and so that we can hold the right party accountable. Because if it turns out that it wasn't the Assad regime, just imagine the problems we're going to have at that point.
Something else that President Trump said, which was that you were talking about the OPCW there and going into Syria to assess. Of course, what happened over the past few years from the start of the civil war was that Syria would give up its chemical weapons and that Russia would make sure that it has done so. And President Trump accused Russia of failing in its duty to do that.
Right, and that's one of those things that's going to be a he said, she said, because we say, no, Russia didn't do their job, obviously, so we say, because you saw there was a chemical strike, but Russia's saying, no, we did, we accomplished that, they don't have it, and that's why it wasn't, the Assad regime, because all those weapons were taken out. And until you get some independent people in there to find out, I don't know that you can really positively identify one way or the other, because if Assad has weapons and he wants to hold on to them, it's going to be really difficult for anybody who doesn't have control of his regime to find out. And so that's why I really emphasize that we need to withdraw our forces from there and contain the civil war within its boundaries, and don't do anything that might actually spread it beyond. Because if we get into a situation here to where Russia feels like they have to respond based on what we've done, now then what are we going to do next? Are we going to step it up another level? I don't know what kind of actions they may take, but even taking any chances for a conflict, either it's a Cold War, or if they should take any military responses of their own, the risk to our country and to the West and to Great Britain and to France is unnecessarily the risk is raising.
Thank you very much. That's retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who is a senior fellow at the Defense Priorities, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.